Hi guys, we were having trouble this morning. We got disconnected right at the last minute from Blog Talk Radio. Sorry about that. We're late again, but only by a couple of minutes. I don't know what is happening up here, but something to our technology. So my husband saved me. That was who you saw in the air just now. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sorry we didn't have any music or anything this morning. I don't know what happened. But we're talking about emotional intelligence. This is Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. One of the things I want to say to us is that we are rarely one thing or another fully. We're going to talk about today what makes some characteristics of emotional intelligence and some characteristics of poor, low emotional intelligence. As we talk about this, it occurs to me to tell you that we're always growing and we're a little bit of both. And so it becomes important for us to realize, well, I'm doing pretty well on these points, not doing so well on these points, and working on yourself. That's really what it's all about, isn't it? So this is no hand slap in any way, shape, or form. It's simply to say, here's some characteristics, and for you to judge how well you're doing so that you can keep them in mind as you move on into the next week. Why don't we do a prayer, pull us all on the same page, put me on the same page as you, and then we will set off on our excursion, okay? Dear God, thank you so much for the information, the gifts we're about to receive through you. We ask to be open, to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. We have deceived ourselves because all human beings do, and we're listening to this show because we don't want to do that anymore. So we're opening ourselves to how we can go about change, and in that, growth and opportunity. We open to this, dear God, in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to the show today. We thank you so much, and so it is. Amen. So, the first article that I pulled out, and we just barely started on for last week, was 10 Subtle Signs Someone Has Low Emotional Intelligence, and this was by Isabel Tenorio. The whole title is 10 Subtle Signs Someone Has Low Emotional Intelligence. Be aware. I am not one bit concerned about other people. I'm always concerned about us. It starts with us, you know. So I think it's extremely important for you to look at these things in terms of not what somebody else is doing, but in terms of what you're doing. So you can play in the fields of your excellence, of your potential. That's really what consciousness is all about, isn't it? We are, I don't know when some of you all that will be listening to the show will. We're in a fall season right now, and if you see me patting my nose, it's because pollen has hit. And boy, do I have a pollen allergy, so it's kind of wacky. So what we talked about last week, just to put us all on the same page, is that emotional intelligence, it's also called the emotional EQ, is the level of your ability to understand others and what motivates them, along with learning how to cooperate with them. I actually think it's about you. I think that's a very poor thing. Definition. I think that this is about how you navigate emotionally in the world, how sensitive you are to others, how diplomatic you are, how truthful. So I think that's a better choice. You see, emotional intelligence is very important because you've only got 4 bodies. You've got the emotional, you've got the mental, you've got the physical and the spiritual. These are all bodies that belong to you. The spiritual body being the energetic body, the part of you that lives on after the physical is past. And I think it's just so important for all of us to wake up and realize no matter what kind of childhood we came from, and sometimes we come from quite difficult childhoods. Sometimes there's a lot of emotionalism in our house. Hi, Becky. So, good morning, darling. With two Beckys. Hello, darlings. Sometimes our household is highly emotional. If our household is highly emotional, what a child usually does is contains the emotional within. You know, they may be very dramatic and everything, but it's a more covert operation because the parents or other children in the house are taking up all the oxygen, if you will, pardon the metaphorical quote. Somebody screams louder and better. Somebody is more of a force. So often we suppress our emotion. The other is true too. Sometimes we, join them. And join them in the same way that they exhibit their emotion. Nevertheless, when we reach a stage where we realize whatever we're doing is just not working for us, it becomes important to look at our intelligence, to see what we need to correct. I came from a very, what do I want to say? My household was more emotional free. Maybe that's why I thought emotion was so interesting and wonderful. I found it through my work in the theater and film and going to see plays and things like that. I thought that was a great use for it. I think I still write that way. Whatever your experience is, and I don't say this casually, at one point when you get to healing, it doesn't matter anymore. Sorry, but it just doesn't. The old story doesn't matter anymore. What matters and what takes its place is what you're going to do now to correct old energetic habits in the past and how you're going to go on to a better life. Okay? So, one of the things that we started with this article about low emotional intelligence, be aware, oh, for heaven's sakes, the drama. And the first one, we stopped after the first one, but I want to go back and just say the first one, as it is written, is holding grudges. And she goes on to explain that this is an initial response to stress. And in a way, it's a wall against threats. I think that's true. Here's why. Try to think in terms of energy. Try to think past personality and who did what or did not do what to whom. Let's leave all that behind right now. And let's just go into the energetic pattern of holding a grudge. You see, holding a grudge is about you. It's about you withholding energy. You withholding your energy from a situation. Well, what does that do? When I say that in spirituality, in our marvelous experience of being a participant in this life, which you all should be, what does that say about your energy? You're withholding energy from life. Sure, you're doing it as a self-protective measure, but you see, you're an adult now, not a child. You don't need the same devices that you used then that I'm glad you had because it kept you alive. Now, it's about living your potential. Now it's about dropping the fear. Now it's about dropping the story and going on and adding your wonderful voice and talents to the world. That's what it's about. Being truly fulfilled, gratified, and not just experiencing the momentary pleasure that we have from looking at a sunset. There's a lot of difference between those words, pleasure and gratification and fulfillment, you see. So holding grudges, energetically holding back, energetically withdrawing, energetically putting up a wall, you see. It just doesn't work. If we're talking about the incredible diving in spirituality, let's try this. Living with the big L, right? Number 2, the inability to control emotions is a real big tell about whether one is emotionally mature, again, whether one has emotional intelligence or not. She says this might lead people to lash out without understanding their emotions or even why they're upset. Well, that's true. Sometimes people really don't understand that they acknowledge they're upset. But sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with these people, it takes 24 hours for them to figure out why they're upset. I am going to put on the table that when you see someone, and this is everybody to a certain extent, until you get really, really fluent in your emotional vocabulary, it's like they give you scattershot, nothing is right. You give scattershot. You know, the kitchen isn't right. You hate the weather. You don't like what this person is doing. It's like nothing's right in your world. And I want you to listen when that happens, because it isn't about all those things. It's about something that you are not yet aware of or acknowledging. That's what I mean by scattershot. Okay, so an emotionally intelligent person understands what's happening and says, there is something bothering me and I don't know what it is yet, and I'm going to wait until I find out, but it's not you, you say to the other person in the room. Okay. Certainly, that does cause people to lash out or to snipe or to do the things that they do when a person's upset. However, what it also causes people to do is blame another person, especially if they came from a blame family, okay? If your family did not deal with emotion well, and you keep in mind there's something called the histrionic personality disorder. A histrionic personality disorder is someone who exhibits a lot of emotion on the surface. It might even scare you on the surface. But in terms of going down and saying, here is really what's bothering me, they don't get to that level. Okay, that's what the histrionic personality is for, this exhibition of emotion. It's to make people think you're feeling deeply when you're not. Why are you not? You're protecting. Again, we've had two things now, holding grudges and inability to control emotions. We're protecting the sense of self that we feel is somehow threatened or was threatened in the past. You see? Okay, good. Hi, everybody. I see all of you all tuning in. I'm just delighted to have you with us today. Okay. So blame is part of this, because I guarantee you anybody who blames is not controlling their emotions in what they're saying to themselves. So blaming another is almost an inevitable part of it, because they're taking so much on themselves that they have an overflow. Okay, let's blame somebody else. And it's a nice, easy fix, isn't it? It's what you did when you were a kid. Because if you could just find somebody to blame, then it wasn't you. Guys, this whole pattern, the inability to control emotions, to blame another, to blame yourself too much, has got to go. Because a lot of those things are simply not true. They're coming from the ego child's mind, and this is what you've always done. And if you're not beating yourself up about your weight, you're beating yourself up about not having your teeth cleaned, you're beating yourself up about not going to the gym, you're beating yourself up about not eating right, you're beating yourself up about how you treat your partner, any excuse will do. Any excuse will do. when you are in emotional unintelligence, any excuse will do. Number 3, she talks about, is this a she or a he? Who am I talking to? Oh, yes, Isabel. Okay, so Isabel Tenorio. Definitely a woman, I would imagine. Okay, poker face is the third one. That just like the previous thing, the inability to control emotions, they're unaware of their emotions and don't want people to know what they're feeling. I don't always feel like this is a choice. I think sometimes people are non-emotive because they really have not wanted their inner experience, their inner vulnerabilities to show to their family when they were young, and therefore they're not very animated when they grow up. I also know a family who came from a very, very tragic beginning, and they're just what you would probably describe as colder people. The interesting thing is they're not, but that's their appearance. I think that they very much keep themselves in a cage, you know? It's often misread, which is a shame, because people move away from someone like that, and so they get what they most fear, that people don't care about them and move away from them. When is that true? No. There's something also that we've talked about before in terms of attachment styles. There's something called dismissive avoidance. These people don't look like they need you. They don't look like they need you at all. You try to get close to them, they're more than ready to tell you they really don't need you. They're getting along just fine without you, which certainly does not bode well for a relationship which should not be based on need, but there is definitely a higher and lower form of need, like there's a higher and lower form of everything because of the higher self and the ego child's mind. For example, years ago, as a matter of fact, about 6 months before I met my husband, I broke my foot. Stupid break. It really was. I wasn't looking, and I put my foot on a stair wrong, and sure enough, the ballerina bone, which is the little bone of the right foot, broke in two. Quite a bad break. And it was interesting because up until that time, I just loved, I took care of myself. I didn't need anybody, right? Well, I don't do well with real invasive procedures, so nobody wanted to operate on my foot, even though I needed a pin in my foot. So I opted for really staying off that foot. And that meant I couldn't even stand on my foot to change cat boxes or do anything, really. And so all my friends hopped in to help in their way. It was the sweetest thing in the world. And sure enough, the foot healed and everything was fine. I didn't need a pin. I really did listen and stay off it. It's so strange, though, because when I would go out in public, people would run over to me and say, "You broke your foot?" I'd say, "Yes, I broke my foot." They'd say, "My daughter broke my foot. My husband broke his foot. Somebody broke his foot." Somebody that everybody knew somebody that broke the foot and didn't stay off of it. And they've had something wrong ever since. Oh, I got that message loudly and clearly because every single solitary time, and sometimes I didn't even go out and I'd still get the phone call, you know. Let me tell you, stay off that foot. So I listened, and sure enough, I healed just fine. Heed the warnings, guys. Listen, okay? Up until that time, I was very independent, and I realized when I looked back on it that what I was shown during that period of time is that we all are in this divine cooperative experience of self. That doesn't mean codependent. That doesn't mean any of the distortions of it. But at its best, I need you and you need me. At its best, we put our energies into something together. And sure enough, when my darling husband came along the following February, I was very aware of that it was a time for me to tell him that I needed him. I had chosen him to give my love to because of who I was and what I had learned, and he was doing the same with me. That there is a lower need that isn't good. I'm needy, right? And there's a higher need that is just one of the things that we exchange as loving, energetic people when we care about each other. So I put that on the table. Everything has a high and low energetic use, you see? Now be honest with yourself about your use of it. That's all I'm saying here. We must be honest enough so that we can change things if there is a nip and tuck that needs to be changed. I'm going to say one other thing. And that is this. You can say, and this is a very honest answer, well, I am needy, but I also am trying to give my needing someone else to someone else, and, you know, all that lovely stuff that's going on too in the higher vibrational mode. And that's true, all right? My job, and energetic healers like me, are going after what's not in keeping with your highest self. You see, a need that is of the highest caliber, motivated by love. I want you to have that. I want you to keep that. Couldn't take that away if I had to, because it's part of the essential you. But your neediness that is motivated by fear and abandonment and those things, that's what I'm going to go after. So what I want you to understand is our emotional bodies have lots of conflict in them. They have everything in them. I'm going after the things. Any energetic healer worth her salt, his salt, is going after the things that are not in keeping with the ascended self. That's really all it's about. You see? We are getting out those things so that the higher energies can flourish and more energy is available to go into that. Okay, good. All right. That was all into poker face. Lord have mercy. Keep aware that, there's something else I want to say about this. A lot is talked about with body language. I am not a body language expert, don't claim to be, but I will tell you this. I think all the emphasis on body language is misguided. Here's why. Because our energy moves around based on the emotion we are experiencing. When we are really in touch with our bodies, which a lot of people are not, when we're really in touch with our bodies reflect what we're feeling. Because the energy placement, my energy placement's on you right now. It's not on you right now. It's up close to me. We call this the AB placement of energy above the body. You see? Okay. All right. I can have it on the car. I can have it inside, in my heart, in my stomach. I can have it all. You know, energy moves around based on the emotion that you're experiencing. This is what I teach actors all the time, and I teach business people the same thing. This is the true nonverbal language, not body language. I can tell you that a lot of people are disconnected from their bodies. Why? Because you've seen a million talking heads, haven't you, where it's just about the mental process and the body is not involved at all. It may rock back and forth. It may stand dead still. It may prowl indiscriminately. Guys, the body follows energy. Okay? If you want to know about this, I do this in a lot of detail on a downloaded series you can get off my website. It's called the IT series. It's a series designed to make you it. Agents used to say, send me somebody with it, Martha, when I was coaching a lot of actors. And I'd tease them and I'd say, what is it? And they said, I don't know, but I'll recognize it when it walks in the door. Well, it's on that 3 CD set, all those components. make it, okay? And it's all about you doing it, not about reading somebody else. Okay. Jumping to conclusions is number 4. She says, they have a distorted view of situations, which causes them to automatically think of answers, even when there isn't a question. Well, that's a nice, confusing way of putting it. It's as if, let me put it a different way. It's as if you, because of the experiences in your childhood, because of your, what appeared to be, and that you based who you were on the appearances, you have an idea of the way things are. You may have grown up thinking nobody likes you, for example. So in every situation, you look for people not to like you, for signs that they don't like you, instead of really taking in. You rather dismiss, and this is a lot of people, you dismiss the good things that are being said about you. People can say wonderful things about you. It's like, but inside you're thinking, well, they don't really know me. So the bottom line is, what conclusions are you jumping to? One of my favorite stories is one about the businesswoman who, her boss, as they were going into a meeting, her boss would say, told her something that very much had to do with how she did business and what she needed to add to her calendar. And they get into the meeting, and my darling friend brings it up, and the boss shut her down. And she spent all weekend long thinking the woman doesn't like me, in spite of the fact that she was so well thought of, well loved, that this woman thought she was fabulous. She was going to quit. By the time she got to Sunday night, she realized she needed to go in and talk to her. So the next morning she went in there and she said, I'm trying to do something weird with this. So what did you mean when you shut me down? You had just told me about it. And the woman said, what I forgot to tell you was that we weren't going to talk about that until you and I decided what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. You see, you can save a world of trouble if you just go in and ask. But what keeps us from going in and ask? Well, we're back to self-protection again. You don't want to be hurt. You anticipate a bad answer. Oh, guys, your life would be so much happier if you don't anticipate things like that. If you just go in and ask. Woo! You don't look very happy today. What's going on? All right. And then suppose you get scattershot. It's not about you, guys. It's about something that's coming up in them. You see, we're going to talk about next week, we're going to talk about cognitive distortions. You know, one of the big ones, it's one of the first ones I'm going to talk about. It's personalization. That means, hello, John. Hello, darling. Well, thank you for that amen. That's very sweet. What happens, my kids, is, my friends, my dears, I want you to get this, is that we see everything as if we had lenses on from our childhood. It's like, you're not going to like me lens, or I'm not going to, I'm not worthy. And so you're looking for all the evidence of that. I mean, everybody's like this. This isn't just you guys. But part of waking up and being emotional intelligence is not to go in through those old doors that tell you you are lesser, but to stand there and to address the person in all fairness and in all honor and say, what's going on here? I'm trying to take it someplace, don't want to take it that. Can you tell me what's happening? And they'll just say, well, I didn't want the group to know that. Not about you at all. So this personalization is just really one of the damaging things that we do to ourselves. We personalize everything. Oh, somebody gave us a funny look. Okay. I used to go in, I used to have a lot of fun with this when I was singing more. I've always been a singer and did a lot of musical theater. And I'd go into a nursing home to sing when my dad was in a, not nursing home, but in a facility. And I would go in and sing all the time, right? And it was loads of fun, but there would always be a few people that had such a sour expression on their face. And I'd go and sit down beside them, and they would just open up, and they'd be the most wonderful people. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about what I was singing. They hadn't even heard me sing most of the time. And we'd laugh, and we'd cause a chaos and have fun. So do not assume. Please don't jump to conclusions. It is not in your best interest. Okay? So find out what's going on. Don't be afraid. Find out what's going on. The adult in you can handle anything. And 99.9% of the time, it has nothing to do with you. Number 5, Isabel says, these people are easily offended. Those who have high emotional intelligence don't let things pierce their thick skin. But those who have low levels might let things get to them easier than normal. Well, that's a kind of odd way of writing it, but okay. I don't believe in having a thick skin. How's that? Either. I'm a sensitive. I am an empath to the extreme. I am. But there's a time for it, and there's not a time for it. I am an empath. If you ask me a question on this show, I'm an empath. If I am in a session with you, okay? But let me tell you, I don't go around reading people. They don't pay me enough to just read people in life. Now, I wasn't able to control that when I was younger. Okay, you may be having some of the same experience, but I'm going to show you now that the more you work on yourself to get your issues out so that you are not inappropriately empathetic, the stronger you become. And you don't get easily offended. And you don't have to have a thick skin. You just are honest. And you just say what's true and find out and want to listen to what is true for other people. And you want to work out a solution. There, all the drama around this, being easily offended, having to have a poker face, doing this, doing that, personalizing, guys, it goes away. It just tells you that you are vulnerable in a childlike way that we now must fix, you see. Hello. That was my little cat Schnitzel, who is lying behind me, and apparently he says I was too loud. I was waking him up. Okay. You don't have to have a thick skin. You have to be real. You see, that's what people don't understand. You have to be real. And then you have to learn, and this leads us into our next point, by the way, and then you have to learn to be real and kind, real and diplomatic. Because the next one is offending others unknowingly. I have a new client who does this all the time. And she doesn't realize that she's actually getting back what she most fears, which is people not liking her. That happens. We had a woman, a friend, a mutual friend of ours, who bought her new house. And she went into the house, and instead of saying, "Oh, darling, I'm so happy for you, it's wonderful," she said, "Well, it's all right if you like that sort of thing." Hello. She didn't even know what she said. But she has a very low level of intelligence. She's angry still in her life. We haven't gotten it out yet. And so it comes out this way. Isabel goes on to say, someone with low emotional intelligence doesn't hold themselves accountable, and this leads to saying things without thinking. And then other people get hurt in the process, while the person that said it doesn't even understand what they've done. They're not listening to themselves. They're not hearing themselves. They don't understand that they're being interpreted incorrectly. they might not be interpreted incorrectly. This actually might be unconsciously deliberate. Isn't that a weird thing? But it can be. If you've got a low line of anger, it's going to come out somewhere. Or jealousy. If you think it's, everybody's got it better than you, do you think that's not going to come out at some point? This is a good way of having it come out. And how nice that they don't think about it, so therefore they can get away with it, because then they can say it, and then they can be the victim again. Oh, you misinterpreted me. I'll go back to saying one other thing, and that is, you and I have talked about in prior radio shows, that it's really important to make your story about who it's about. Okay? Is it about you? Is it about a situation? Is it about another person? And really concentrate on that, because sometimes we don't realize that we're making it all about us every time, all about us. And I remember a story, a dear friend of mine from years past would tell me about this. She said that when she was in school, I think it was when she was in college, I believe it was the psychology professor. This is not my story, by the way, so forgive me if I am misinterpreting something. But the psychology professor, who had two little kids, married, two little kids, had a terrible traffic accident and died. Well, there was a man there who was part of this group of friends who was standing around at the funeral talking, and he said something that struck all of them as awful. And it was, "Oh, I just can't believe this happened. This is such a tragedy, because she was the only one in my whole life that understood everything about me." And he made it all about him. And it turned everybody off in this group. A man that so needs to belong is actually not watching what he's saying and doing and how he's reacting. You see? Now, we can't help doing that when we still have issues. He was very sincere in that it was all about him. But it's always all about us in our ego child's mind, guys. It's only as we, get beyond these old issues and build up momentum in the highest self that we can realize what we're doing and change our behaviors and how we think and what we say. Hello, dear. Hello, Vicki. Well, good morning to you too, dear. We're glad you're with us. Okay. So that was offending others unknowingly. Number 7 is someone who is unmoved by sad movies. Actually, I don't follow this. One of the reasons I pull some of the articles I do is I don't agree with them, Unmoved by sad movies. Okay. Not necessarily. Okay, let's talk about this. Now, she goes on to say, and I'll read that first before I tell you what I think. She says this is a response to a lack of empathy. They don't put themselves in the situation. To them, it's just a movie and it's separated from reality. Okay, that's just fine. That may be true sometimes, okay? But it's not true all the time. If somebody's an engineer, for example, they may enjoy film, and I know a man that was like this. He didn't have a real grasp, and he went to, God bless him, he went to L.A. because a friend of his, who's, by the way, doing quite well out there, went first. And he went out because he was going to be a big star too, and he didn't have it in him. He didn't have an emotional base, he didn't want that. I remember asking him one time what his favorite movie was. And he said, a movie called 8 Seconds. Now, I hadn't seen it. I went and saw the movie. I was very curious about his makeup, right? His psychological makeup. And it's a movie about bull riding. And it's got a lot of physical stuff to it. And it's about a man who loses his friend bull riding. And then he goes on and gets on this bull and stays on in an extra 8 seconds for his friend that died. It's a tribute of some sort. And he actually touched his heart and said, that one got me right here. Okay, now my point of this is he actually had to have a very physical movie that led him into that. You see, we're made up, and this is part of my system called the Learning Communication System. If you ever want to have it in your company, let me know. But everybody in the world is made up of 3 components. Something called the reasoner, which is the part of you that thinks first. The feeler, the part of you that feels emotion first or hears emotion first. This is how you learn and how you communicate, by the way. That's why we call it the LCS. It's the learning and communication sequence. And number 3, the physical body. This is the mover aspect, the part of you that commits to action physically. My mover is very low. If there was a fire that broke out in the room, even Michael, who's downstairs, could rush to that fire because he's a mover 2nd. I'm a mover 3rd. He'd get to that fire a lot faster than I would. I'd be going through my process. Oh, my God, there's a fire in the room. Mental process. Oh, my God, the house is going to burn down. Oh, I've got to save me and my babies and my husband, not in that order, but I've got to, I got to get motivated here. Okay, and then I deal with the 3rd aspect. Now, we're all different aspects. I have some tests that will help us determine what you are, but most of the time I can actually see it and hear it in your conversation. Guys, if she just says, unmoved by sad movies, that is wrong. That is wrong. Because there are people that simply are very sensitive and have a fine emotional vocabulary, but do things in different orders. So she's just blooming wrong about that, I might cry at a sad movie, but probably I'm not going to cry at the same sad movie that a feeler is going to cry at. They're going to cry. I'm looking at other things. So if the psychology doesn't hold true, as it doesn't in some movies, I'm over here going, boy, what a terrible film. Somebody else goes, oh, it made me feel. Are we wrong? Absolutely not. We're seeing different things and responding to different things. You understand? So you just can't make a blanket statement like that. Not only can you not make a blanket statement like that, I actually think that's wrong. I think it makes people feel less than when there is a logical explanation why they're like they are. Now, on the other hand, it could be somebody who's emotionally suppressed. Okay, then we work on ourselves, right? But if you don't know who you are to begin with, that's the reason I developed the LCS. Who are you at your finest? Who are you, really? And now let's get you to the real person you are. You see? Number 8 is the inability to keep friendships. People with low emotional intelligence have a hard time keeping up with their friends, as they are often guilty of misunderstandings and constant conflicts. They often come off as abrasive as a result of lacking empathy. This is true. I think it goes back to offending others unknowingly, that you don't necessarily understand what you're saying. You're not listening to yourself and your tone of voice. You're not self-aware. Self-awareness is a big part of emotional intelligence, isn't it? It is. We've talked about that in previous shows. Sometimes they can be very abrasive. I have a woman right now who is very abrasive. She just is, wow. You just look at her and go, okay. And so far, she doesn't understand because she has a drive for attention, a need for attention. It is so profound that she'll get it even if she has to be abrasive. And she needs that so bad that she'll get it by manipulating you, by offending you. She likes the people that give her a lot of attention. She doesn't like the people that don't give her any attention or that just try to do business in a normal way and have their own policies. Interesting, huh? If you find yourself as one of those people that need attention above all, that's part of the histrionic personality, and it's real important to get. Because why? Why not be who you really are? It's good enough. In fact, it's everything. Okay? All right. The next one is number 9. She says it's being tone deaf. Now, let me explain what she means by that, because I think she's saying kind of the same thing over and over again. They're often out of touch. They only think about themselves and don't put themselves in other people's shoes. So when they're told they're being rude, they just don't see anything wrong with it. And that's what they say. Now, what I'm going to say, just to add something to it, is they often justify it instead of apologizing about it. They justify it. You need this. Okay? You're not listening. Instead of just saying, well, I apologize for being that way. I'm sorry. I'm frustrated because of this. Or I don't even know what I'm frustrated about. I'm just frustrated. Okay? You understand? Don't justify anything. Listen. Apologize. I'm sorry that you interpreted it that way. I did not mean it that way. I meant it this way. And I'm going to watch my language from now on, you might say. Because I certainly didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And number 10, and I think this is a good one, they think everybody's the same. This is also an element of narcissism, I think. And that is that they think everybody feels the same way they do. I can't tell you, I try to literally not have a political platform. This is not the time on these shows. It's not the time in my sessions. It's not the time in my classes. And I'll shut anybody down that starts on that path, because this is not what the show is for. All right? I can't tell you how many things, emails, that are going around and everybody just assumes you feel the way they do. And some of these things are quite offensive. Don't do that, guys. I have a client who now has waked up to that, because we've talked about this a lot, because she used to do that. She used to try to educate a woman that felt differently politically about things. And I said, well, this woman is in her 70s or 80s. What makes you think you're going to change her mind? And who are you to try? Back off. Don't send those things out. That's going to get in the way of a friendship. And by the way, it certainly did. Guys, everybody's allowed to feel whatever way they do about everything. They are allowed to live and die the way they choose. And you wouldn't want anybody interfering with you. But when you have these ideas that they're wrong, and you even let that interfere with a friendship, aren't there other things to like about what who we are, other than what we might believe about this or that? I think so. Look for those. That's the loving thing to do. Now, emotional intelligence, we want you to know, is a learned skill. Like I said in the beginning, it's rare that somebody is all emotionally intelligent or all not emotionally intelligent. We want to challenge some of these things that we do well, and some of these things we don't do well, and look at them squarely in the face. How do you do that? You slow down. You slow down. You consider why you said or did or feel the way you do. You consider what the truth is beyond whatever the lie is that you're telling yourself. Okay? There was a woman that came to me years ago, and everything she did was urgent, 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 urgent. She really had very little self-awareness. Everything was urgent. We have succeeded through the years in slowing her down quite a bit, and hence being more self-aware. But there's nothing urgent. There just isn't. There just isn't. You may have a little deadline you've got to meet here or there. But this urgency about life and running to the next moment is just the way you don't have to look at yourself. It's really important with emotion. Emotion is like a signpost. It tells you to look at something more deeply. And I'm back to the beginning again, where we must have an emotional vocabulary. You must print those words of emotion out. Look up emotions, all the different emotions. Find the longest list you can. Actually think about this. Do this as an exercise. Everything falls under two emotions, fear and love. Sometimes the same emotion falls under both. We talked about need, by the way. Remember? Okay, well, so there's an ego child's my need. I'm needy. I've got to have you with me all the time. I have no self that is not you. And there is a need where you have worked on yourself. You know what love is, and you want to give it and receive it from another. It's a healthy way of using need. But that would go under both columns, wouldn't it? Because it depends on how you use it. You see? I think that that's extremely important for you to realize. I think that it's extremely important to realize that you may need help making your presentation. I often move in and help people write presentations or give presentations when they're mad as hell about something. You've got to change your mind. You can't go in and do that. And so I'm a nice neutral thing that can help you get all the anger out of that so you can go in and do your job well. What's the reason for the anger? Well, I say all but 10% is about your past. When we remove that, there's not much left. Now, the next article I'm going to reference is 18 Signs You Have High Emotional Intelligence. And this is by Travis Bradbury. So I want you to pat yourself on the back when you're doing some of these. And if you find that you're not doing some of these, well, then you'll know what to work on, okay? Number 1, you have a robust emotional vocabulary. Wow, you have a robust, I love that word, robust, emotional vocabulary. For God's sake, start doing the work on those words. Because you're not just fearful, my darlings. That can be broken down into 100 components. You're not just happy. That can be broken down into a lot of components. For God's sake, develop yourself. Develop what you are and your use of these things. And be able to talk articulately. You're trapped if you can't talk articulately. It's as if you have all of this inside and no means of expression. I think of that marvelous writer Christy Brown. Did you all know Christy Brown? He's the one that they did a movie about called My Left Foot. Okay. The movie was not, here I am, near as good as the book. You know why? Because I got something different out of it. Out of My Left Foot, this is what I got. Christy Brown had a very bad case of cerebral palsy. He actually, for a long time, was thought, his Irish family had a ton of children, and he was very frustrated. He was very frustrated. And he was always given something plush because they thought he was mentally retarded. He couldn't talk. He didn't talk. So one Christmas, I think, one of his sisters got a chalkboard and some chalk, and she was sitting down below him. He was on a nice soft couch. As usual, he got a little plush stuffed animal that he couldn't hurt himself on. And he was so frustrated that he grabbed the chalk out of that girl's hand with the little toe of his left foot and scribbled. As luck would have it, his mother was standing in the kitchen. She heard the commotion and she came out and she erased what he scribbled and she drew an A. And she said, "If you can understand me, Christy, draw an A." He scribbled again. He was so frustrated. She tried one more time. She said, "This is the last time I'm going to do this. But if you could understand me, draw this A." And he drew an A. Now, the rest of the story was this. So they found out there was not only some intelligence in him, but a massive amount of intelligence. If you ever read his poetry, Christy Brown is Christie, Christy Brown. His book, Down All the Days, he's got several marvelous books on Ireland. You can't read it fast because it's one image after another, powerful images that he had locked away inside of him for a very long time. He tried painting and he just could not. He found himself, while it was relieving at first, he found himself he didn't want to paint. It was not enough expression for him. So he went to writing. He typed on a machine with the little toe of his left foot. It must have been incredibly tedious. And he wrote these brilliant books. Now, back then, to cure this cerebral palsy, he had to distort his body into really tight positions to control what muscles he could control with that little toe. And they told him he had to give up writing to get well or to get better from this. And he couldn't, which I think is what that story means to me. That self-expression and that authenticity that you find is so powerful that he sacrificed himself for this. And sure enough, died young. Fabulous, interesting story to me. You got to have a robust emotional vocabulary, guys. That's where it all starts. You know, I'll say, again, this goes back to some of the things that we talked about not having a good emotional vocabulary. It's too easy to accuse a partner of being selfish when they're just protecting themselves from you. Find out what you're doing, guys. That's the power. Changing that, you see. Number 2, you've heard me say this before. You're curious about people. I go to that marvelous Pat Conroy that says, his life story was, tell me a story. He always wanted to know your stories, you know. You're curious about people. It isn't all about you. I love that. It tells you a lot about human nature. It makes you smarter, doesn't it? Number 3, you embrace change. If that word change still has you shaking in your boots, we need to do a little work, because emotionally intelligent people, as he goes on to say, are always flexible and constantly adapting. And if you do not embrace change, you are not very good at being flexible and adapting. And it's a really important characteristic right now. Fearing change is paralyzing, he says. It's a major threat to your success and happiness. It is. We want to be able to realize what change is. Change is the movement of God. Change is the movement of God. I would add one other thought to that, and is that everything turns out well in the end. If something is not good, it's not the end. Keep the energy going, Because too often, because of our early childhood home, we stop the energy from moving and we say, oh, see, it's just like what I thought. It's all a bunch of crap. It's all random. We're all screwed. I'm a victim, and we go back to that old story. Guys, there's no reason to do that. Change is good. It's always good. Even if it doesn't look good, it's always good. Invest in that. If life is just a hologram and your life becomes what you think about and how you feel, for God's sake, write a better story for yourselves. The time is now. You can't use that old story because the ending's the same. You got to write a new story, and then the ending can be different. John, you are so cute today. He says another amen. All right, there we go. Thank you, sweetie. All right, number 4. Emotionally intelligent people know their strengths and weaknesses. And I want to add one thing to that, and they accept both. They do what they can to strengthen themselves. Even if they're not good at something, they hire somebody to do that for them. Okay? That's fine. Realizing exactly who you are and taking care of yourself in this way and accepting both things. He goes on to say emotionally intelligent people don't just understand their emotions, they know what they're good at and what they're terrible at. Absolutely. You absolutely do. And you accept both of them instead of trying to hide what you're terrible at. Why hide? Other people are terrible at it too. Other people are better at it too. This whole narcissistic mind game of people are better, people are worse, I don't have any worth, has just got to go. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. You're here for a reason, and you've got talents, gifts, and abilities you haven't even begun to use, or that need to be developed. For God's sake, get on with it. Let's go on. Stop this game about good and bad and whether you're going to, don't do that. Don't do that. Just find out who you are and go for it. And always keep learning. That's my advice to you. Always keep learning. So he goes on to say having a high emotional intelligence means that you know your strengths and you know how to lean into them and use them to your full advantage while keeping your weaknesses from holding you back. Yeah, hire somebody to do what you're weak on. This is about using them to your full advantage, but not manipulatively, but smartly. If you are manipulating with any of your talents, gifts, and abilities, you might want to look at your motivations about why you feel like you have to do that. Okay. Number 5. I'm hurrying through some of these, even though I think that they're pretty self-explanatory. You're a good judge of character. Much emotional intelligence comes down to social awareness, the ability to read other people. Isn't that something? I want to object, but it's true. You're going to be a better reader of other people, but only on one condition: that you don't accept any bull from yourself, that you work on yourself, that you know yourself inside and out emotionally and what motivates you. Once you find out what motivates you, by the way, not only what motivates you to be the good person you are, but what has motivated you to be the manipulative little shrew you are. That's important information. We get to a place in our healing where we just say to the person that we're working with, I don't care what you find. You can find I'm just absolutely a despicable person, but let's, for heaven's sakes, confront it so that I can transcend and be who I am. But we're so busy hiding our faults and our flaws. You've got to investigate yourself first, guys. That's the only way you're going to be able to read other people. You won't know how to read other people. You will assume. And again, we've realized that's a mistake. Assuming. only when you know who you are can you all of a sudden know what's motivating other people or having a pretty good idea. You see? All right. People cease to become mysteries to you when you are no longer a mystery to yourself. Number 6. By the way, I'll go one step farther. I think God becomes very trustworthy when your idea of God grows up. I think you become very trustworthy when your idea of self grows up. And we're talking about emotionally, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, maturing and thinking new things. Number 6, you are difficult to offend. He goes on to say, if you have a firm grasp of who you are, of whom you are, it's difficult for someone to say or do something that gets your goat. Emotionally intelligent people are self-confident and open-minded, which creates a pretty, here we are again at that word, or these words, thick skin. You're able to mentally draw the line between humor and degradation. There's no personalization, I want to add. Again, I'm going to say, I think these people are speaking a very good psychological, emotional vocabulary, but they aren't speaking a very good conscious one, because you don't have to have a thick skin. You just have to realize where somebody's coming from and have compassion for them. Let's do that instead of having a thick skin. If I wanted thick skin, I would have stayed in a city and fought my way to whatever I wanted. Then, no, that's not what you want to do. You want to be who you are. And I'm soft and fuzzy, by the way. You may not know it from us talking on the radio like this, but I am. I choose that. I do, but not naive. I am as discerning as they come. But it's because I call myself on my crap. That's important. And sometimes we don't even know it's crap, do we? Until we do. Difficult to offend. Yeah, you can offend me. Yeah, I hear insults go by, not very often. But, when I recognize a client is angry, I know she's angry. And it helps to know that she's not angry with me, even though it may sound like that. She's not. Do I take that past the session? Nope. Mm-mm. Just the way it is. If you understand where somebody else is coming from, good. That's all you need. Also, a part of that is, when we talk about blame, I want to put this on the table. You've heard me say this before, but a long time ago. For blame to work, you have to have a blamer and a blamee. And I think it's really important, don't get me wrong, when we've done something wrong, we need to apologize. Absolutely. But if you're in a situation with a blamer and you haven't done anything wrong and you really don't know what this is about, why would you be the blamee and take it on? Unless you're personalizing, unless you haven't found out who you really are and are not a good person. I mean, you've got to find out that you're a good person, you try hard, and what is this about? Well, it isn't about me. It's about their mood. You see? Again, if you've done something, apologize. It's a big thing. But if you haven't done anything and you're with a blamer, just say, okay, I can tell you don't feel so good. So when you feel better, we'll talk. Number 7, you know how to say no to yourself and others. I have a course that I sometimes teach in business, which is selling no. How to sell no. And perhaps we ought to talk about that sometime. A big one for you, huh, Vicki? Thank you very much for saying that. That's so sweet. Travis goes on to say that emotional intelligence means knowing how to exert self-control. You delay gratification and you avoid impulsive action. Research conducted at the University of California, San Francisco shows that the more difficulty you have in saying no, the more likely you are to experience stress, burnout, and even depression. Saying no is indeed a major self-control challenge. This is what this article says. So no is a powerful word that you should not be afraid to wield. When it's time to say no, emotionally intelligent people avoid the phrases such as, I don't think I can, I'm not certain. Saying no to a new commitment honors your existing commitments and gives you opportunity to successfully fulfill them. And it keeps you in touch with your choice, which comes out of who you are, which certainly is a way to reflect who you are. Now, there's a way to sell no. All right? Do you think you're going to sell no by not listening to the other person? You're not going to sell no. They need to feel heard. Okay? So you want to sit there and hear them. You want to have your energy on them. You want to listen to what they have to say. You do not want to interrupt. Okay? Right? It's really important to help them understand that there are other options other than you. Okay, that's a good point in selling no, and that perhaps the idea isn't in their best interest, and they need a little more time to think about it anyway. All right, you can also tell them how busy you are right now, and that you were delighted to help them in the past. But sometimes it's time for it, and sometimes it's not, and you can't do it now, all right? But what happens to selling no and being okay with selling no if you feel like everybody's got to like you? You see, that's a loaded gun pointed right at your head, and by the way, it's your hand that's holding that gun because you want to be liked so much. But what if you can sell no and still be liked? You might just need a little instruction on how to do it. I'm giving you some general points, but the fact is, let's hear your specific problem, and then we can come up with a better solution for you so that you can sell no and still be liked. A lot of times, our issues at a certain point in our in the medium grasp of our consciousness is just because we don't know how to do things differently. Nobody's ever instructed us about what to say and how to do and what the psychological ramifications of what we're saying are. Well, that's what I do for a living. So if you have something you need to run by me, by all means do in a session, and we can address that. There are things that sometimes we're saying that trigger the other person. The big thing that triggers the other person is when you're the ego child's mind. Because it's not real. It's not honest. And many times the other person, by their reaction, is just telling us that. The universe is telling us that through that person. That we need to do something else. Okay. Number 8. You let go of mistakes. Well, in my opinion, are mistakes really mistakes as long as you learn from them, right? And he's going to go on to say something like that. Okay. He says, emotionally intelligent people are able to adapt, there's that word again, and adjust for future success. So what, you make a mistake. You know, I say start, and then the market's going to show you what you need to add in your advertising and what, because you're going to get all sorts of feedback that you go is undesirable. Then you go back and change things. You work it, you tweak it until it becomes what you need it to do. The world tells you. Is that a mistake? Well, it is if you're afraid of criticism and critique. If you had an overly critical parent and is still hiding from them, that's going to be devastating. You got to fix what's broken, kids. That's really important to do. Dwelling too long on your mistakes makes you anxious and gun shy. Actually, that doesn't make you anxious and gun shy. It just exacerbates the problem that's there from the childhood. While forgetting about them completely makes you bound to repeat them. That's right. Let's learn from them. I don't think mistakes are mistakes when you learn from them. You know, what is that wonderful expression? It doesn't matter how often you fall down. It just matters how often you get up. I like that. All right. Number 9. Look at the time. You give and expect nothing in return. Emotionally intelligent people build strong relationships because they're constantly thinking about others, but not, I am adding, at the expense of self. And not because you want something back from the other person. Emotionally intelligent people don't give unless they can give without conditions. You understand? That's honest. That's real. Number 10. Oh, we've had this one. You don't hold grudges. Yep. He goes on to say the negative emotions that come with holding a grudge are actually a stress response. Yep. Just thinking about the event sends your body into flight or fight mode. I have an exception. There's no such thing as flight or fight. There is flight and fight. You're doing both. You may not be aware you're doing both, but you're always doing both. So the phrase should be flight and fight, okay? Because you're always doing both. You can be doing both at the same time. You can be doing both separate times, but they're always there together, you know? They really are. It's a survival mechanism that forces you to stand up and fight or run for the hills when faced with a threat. When the threat is imminent, this reaction is essential for your survival. Let me give you an example of flight and fight. For example, let's say you choose to flee. Okay, so you're flighting. There's a word. All right, so you have chosen the flight route. Do you realize that you're going to be mad about that? That's the fight response. You see? Okay. And if you fight, do you realize that what's under the fight is probably terrible fear? A fear that makes you want to flee, and you are on some level doing so, energetically. That's why it's the same energetic thing, you see? It's not one or the other. Okay. I can probably expound on that more, but I'm trying to save time right now. All right, what do I want to say here? All right. You don't hold grudges if you are emotionally intelligent. I want to go on to say, do you realize all you've got is this moment, this literal moment of right now? And you don't want to withhold from it. And holding a grudge is taking some energy that you would normally create with right now and learn from and be here and connect with. And it's just simply not available because it's in the past holding a grudge. Not in your best interest. Everybody all right? Okay. Number 11. He goes on to say you neutralize toxic people. You neutralize, it kind of sounds like you terminate toxic people. Maybe I have seen too many movies. He goes on to say, high emotionally intelligent individuals control their interactions with toxic people by keeping their feelings in check. Absolutely. When you are confronted with a toxic person, they approach the situation rationally. Okay. They identify their own emotions and don't allow anger and frustration to rule the chaos. They also consider the difficult person's standpoint and are able to find solutions in common ground. Emotionally intelligent people are able to take the toxic person with a grain of salt to avoid letting him or her bring them down. Okay. There's several things I want to say about this, and I don't want to take a lot of time with anything. This is real good advice unless you're with somebody mentally ill. We stay too long trying to understand mental illness. You are not going to be able to understand mental illness. If someone around you is mentally ill, and the toxicity is coming from that, you just simply have to protect your time and your energy and do the best you can with that. It may mean moving away from the person and loving them, but not seeing them. It may be seeing them sometime and limiting how much exposure you have to that person. Okay? It may be getting yourself all ready and knowing perfectly well who they are when you walk in. I have a dear friend who continues to walk into her very toxic family with a fantasy that it's all going to be all right now. And then she gets slammed when reality hits the fantasy, because it's never all right. Why have that fantasy to begin with? Why not go on and find the family that you want and create your friends and create a loving environment around you? Okay. If you are working with truly a mentally ill person, I do want to say you may have to get off their radar. That's always my go-to. I always recommend to people, get off the radar. Don't answer the emails. Even if they are baiting you to answer the emails, just get off the radar. Don't exist for them. Disappear. Okay, you don't have to change your home. That's not what I'm talking about. But just don't give them anything to react to. All right, number 12. Emotionally intelligent people don't seek perfection. This is important. They don't set perfection as their target because they know it doesn't exist. You see, the only perfection that exists is God's perfection, and it's in the imperfection of you accepting all of you. You as imperfect. What's hard to understand about that? That's how you become more and more spiritual, is by accepting all of you and being very realistic about it all, you see. Human beings, by our very nature, are fallible. When perfection is your goal, you're always left with a nagging sense of failure that makes you want to give up or reduce your effort. You end up spending your time lamenting what you failed to accomplish and what you should have done differently. You're just making yourself a victim, kids. Welcome to the Victim Club. Nothing's perfect. Let's relax and enjoy life and not try to make things perfect. And let whatever is supposed to happen organically develop in God. That's where the perfection is. Number 13, emotionally intelligent people appreciate what they have. They're grateful people. You take time to contemplate what you're grateful for. It improves your mood. It reduces your stress. It says it reduces the stress hormone cortisol by 23%. What? That's marvelous. There was research conducted at the University of California, Davis. They found that people who worked daily to cultivate an attitude of gratitude experience improved mood, energy, and physical well-being. Very important. Negative momentum in the ego child's mind, where you spin in your stuff and your story, simply has to be changed. Okay. Number 14, emotionally intelligent people disconnect and take regular time off. I think that's a really important one. I'm going to hurry right now through the rest of these. Number 15, caffeine lemon. They limit their caffeine intake. I take that with a grain of salt. I have a couple of caffeine teas in my day and love it thoroughly. And but I mean, I'm not drinking it all day long. It's how it affects you. Some people I know have fine energy and never drink anything with caffeine. Number 16, you get enough sleep. If you're having trouble with sleep, see your doctor, please. That's very important. There are many reasons one doesn't sleep. Not just anxiety. You can have something that's going on physically. One of the things I always ask when somebody says I have trouble sleeping or I'm experiencing anxiety is, how much water do you drink? because there is a cellular anxiety that can happen when you don't drink enough water, because your body is mostly water, okay? It needs water. For God's sake, drink at least 64 ounces of water a day. Do I like it? No, I don't. I do things to make it a little better, like put some lemon in it or whatever. And by the way, gaseous water is not water. You need to drink plain water. Put a little lemon in it. Put a little flavoring in it, but drink water. Okay. Number 17, you stop negative self-talk in its tracks. Absolutely. If somebody is around you and just bitching all the time, do you want to listen to that? I wouldn't. And how about your negative self-talk? I think that part of your therapy is finding out what's true beyond the lies you tell yourself. Nobody likes me. Really? Nobody? Okay. What kind of life is that going to create? Let's get real. Okay? Tell me what's true. Not a big generality like that. That's a lie that you tell yourself, and it's going to really bring you down. Think that through. Number 18, you won't let anybody limit your joy. Oh, that's an important one, guys. Your sense of pleasure and satisfaction are derived from the opinions of other people. If they are, you're not really enjoying yourself. You've got to be happy and joyful and grateful within yourself. And if you have never found that, and some people never find that because of their past and because they're suppressing that part of them, it's time to find that now. It's fine to open up those possibilities, because the only thing that matters is that you are the expression of who you are as your ascended self, which is love. And that'll make you happy, okay? Guys, we have very little time left.
90
2 minutes.
seconds.
Oh, well, thank you. 90 seconds. That's even more specific. Guys, if you've enjoyed this and other shows, please tell your friends. Get the word around social media and other ways, word of mouth, whatever. We appreciate your doing that. Conscious community grows, and we get so thrilled when we see that happening all the time. Next week, we're going to talk about cognitive distortions. Last week, you all told me to go back and pick up that, and let's talk about that so we can make sure we aren't doing any of those things. Dear God, thank you so much for all these dear people and their lives just as they are, and the changes that are to come as they open and deepen and grow. We thank you for the opportunities right here, right now. And we say this in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, in the name of everybody listening to the show. And thank you, Michelle. That's so sweet. I love you too. I love all of you. Thank you so much for listening. We have so much fun, don't we? I think so. Okay, kids. Next week, be here, be square. Take care. Bye-bye.